So starting recording now. Okay, so thank you for joining us today. For those who don't know me, my name's Steve Johnston. I'm the Principal Marine Officer for the MMO in the Northwest. So we've got offices in Preston, in Luttrell House and in Whitehaven. So the aim of this meeting is basically so that you've got a chance, the industry's got a chance to come and discuss topics they're interested in, and then based on what you've said in previous meetings, we invite sort of guests and specialist teams to come and talk. So today we've got quite a full agenda, and a lot of the people that have been invited today are based on what you asked for in previous meetings. So for today's agenda, first of all, it's going to be Jacob Bestwick, who's going to give us a talk about quota. That's going to be followed by Courtney Inch from our RFG team, talking about the Northwest Initiative and the newly appointed Northwest Regional Manager, Kat Wignall, who was used to be part of the MMO, but has recently moved across to Seafish for that. We've then got a session on grants. So we've got Matt Darlison and Kate Curtin from DEFRA, and then also somebody from the MMO grants team as well, hopefully. Then Pete Clark, our Director of Operations, who'll be just giving a quick update on where we are with IVMS, and also some from the IVMS team will be on that. And then the last sort of scheduled session then is Rebecca Tracy talking about the shellfish fisheries management plans, and then it'll be followed by any other business. There's a couple of things I had to discuss on any other business. There's a few questions that came in regarding the wind farms in the Irish Sea, so I'll pick up on that. A few things with the MCA and medicals, and also a couple of questions that came specifically, one to do with bass drift netting. So I'll just check. Jacob is on the call.
Yep, I'm here.
You are, Jacob. Okay, great. Right. Okay. Well, if you're happy, we'll just crack on with your part, and then we'll take from there.
Yep.
Just whilst Jacob's loading that up, most of you will be used to me doing quota. It's Katie. Hi, everyone. People like Ron, etc. So when I started this job in March 2021, you may well remember, because RFGs are relatively new at the time, I used to job share with Sarah Allison, who used to do these quota presentations for the north side of the country. And I've covered the role for the past sort of 12 to 18 months on my own. But Jacob's now come in and he's my job share. So I haven't gone anywhere. I'm still here. My phone number is still the same and I'm still contactable for anyone who wants to chat to me. But Jacob's obviously going to do the quota presentation today. So you'll see one or both of us probably in these meetings in future. But both our numbers are at the end of the slides, so feel free to contact either of us. We're both doing the same job. We're both happy to help anyone. Thanks, Jacob.
That's all right. Right. So I'm going to get started. And the first stop we've got here is COD 7A. So on the left, that's the format of the presentations has stayed the same. So on the left-hand side, we've got what we call our master yearly uptake graph. So that the blue bar shows you what we were given initially in allocation. The orange bar shows you if there's been any changes in allocation. So that might be where myself or Katie's traded some quota in or out. And the grey bar is what the uptake has been. On the right hand side, we've got a uptake by month breakdown. So you can see the different blocks, different colours represent a different month. So what we can see for this year is the cod, we've had an allocation of 2.8 tonnes. The catch limit at the moment is 100 kilogram monthly bycatch limit, and the uptake so far has been 0.25 tonnes. And on the graph on the right hand side, you can see that the uptake so far this year has already kind of passed what we would see in a normal year, but we do have the 2.8 tonnes, so we've got enough quota at the moment to cover that. The next up we've got is place 7A. So in terms of allocation, this year we had 146 tonnes, which was a slight reduction compared to previous years. And as you can see from the bottom, the uptake is usually around that kind of 13 to 10 tonne mark. On the left hand side, the uptake so far this year, as you can see with the light blue bar, it's maybe slightly behind where it would normally be. The catch limits currently are set at 8 tonnes for the under 10s and 3 tonnes for the over 10s. So there is definitely like a catch limit there if that's around. We've also got Nethrops, that's for the whole of Area 7. So for the quota on this one, this year we've had an allocation of 38.3 tonnes for the under 10s and 18.5 tonnes for the over 10s. The catch limits is currently set at 8 tonnes for the unders and 15 tonnes for the over 10s. These are quarterly limits. And on this graph, at the moment, there's been no trading in. You can see the uptake has been a little bit variable. So in 2020, we had about 10.5 tonnes. In 2021, there was nearly 30 tonnes, and then last year about 7.5. So this is a stock that we are able to trade in if it's needed, but that depends kind of on the uptake. So far this year, you can see the uptakes. There's not been much uptake. And then we've got Sol 7A. So in terms of allocation for this one, we this year received 9.4 tonnes for the under 10s and half a tonne for the over 10. This is one that the past couple of years we've been looking to trade in. So you can see, particularly in 2022, the peak of the orange bar. And this year we've also been looking to trade this in to be able to support a fishery there, as we're advised that that was something that you guys were kind of interested in being able to do. Unfortunately, we've not seen that much uptake so far. So that's kind of one of our questions for industry today is Sol 7A still something you're looking for and wanting to see us trade in, or is that not a fishery that's going to be worth it for you guys? We've got so the catch limits last year were, this graph on the bottom left hand side is a catch limit graph. So the catch limits last year were at 3 tonnes for most of the year. At the moment they're at 2 tonnes. So it's also like good information for us to know what kind of catch limit you would need to make a fishery viable. The uptake this year so far has kind of mirrored the previous years. As you can see, the light blue bit for 2023 and 2022 are pretty similar.
I'll jump in with you there, Jacob, if you don't mind, just because I attended the first RFGs where we talked quite a bit about Sol 7A, and there was quite a lot of conversation. I can remember, I can't remember who with now. I'd have to go back to speak to so many people these days, but I know the conversations were over the allocations being cut and you guys having a lack of allocation in terms of not having set catch limits to be able to actually invest back in the fishery in terms of getting sole gear, etc., and that you wanted to see consistency in catch limits. So over, like, I mean, we worked hard on that in 2021, but looking forward for 2022, that's what I did quite substantially last year, was trade in so that I could keep those catch limits high for the last couple of years and provide you some consistency going forward. Now my intention is to do the same as next year, to repeat the same thing, like let's keep the catch limit, and you guys agreed that 2 tonne was kind of like the minimum. So at the beginning of the year, you've got some consistency, you know that it's not going to fall below 2 tonnes, you're suddenly going to lose being able to catch the sole in terms of investment, but it hasn't, in terms of the actual uptake, that hasn't really reflected anything in terms of our sort of trading in and keeping the catch limits at 2 tonnes. So I know that obviously this is being recorded, so other people will see this who aren't on the call today. Me and Jacob will be really interested if anyone's had any thoughts on investing in sole gear, or is there any reasons why you haven't done it? Has there been something else, like other factors that maybe have contributed to maybe why you may not have been looking at sole now that we're bringing some extra in? Obviously I know we've got the Northwest Initiative, so maybe that will populate something in the future. So happy to carry on, but just keen to get people's thoughts and feedback on where they are at with sole now, really. Thanks, Jacob. Sorry for interrupting.
Just out of interest, what's the lag on the data that's coming through? Because those fisheries, a lot of the nethrop, the sole, and the place fishery tend to be more summer fisheries. So, do you know, is it a few weeks? Is it just through validation recently this month?
About 2 weeks,
yeah,
normally, roughly.
2 weeks.
Couple of
Okay.
weeks.
Yeah, because it's sort of it would have those fisheries would have started replaced sometimes as a bycatch in the Nefrot fishery as well. So I think that's why the uptake is low at the moment. So that you expect it to be, the next few months it'll be a higher percentage that will be taken. I mean, one of the questions that sort of came out last time as well was that I don't know if there's any fishermen who want to sort of come in on that the sole gear kind of elements who are on the call, but was just the capping of licenses that people were obviously it's been the under 10 capped licenses this year has been lifted, and it was the previous year, but there was going to be potentially a decision made sometime about whether that'll be they'll remain uncapped going forward. I think they were just for a short period. If it was going to be to invest in that gear, a few fishermen were a bit hesitant. Is there any fishermen who would like to comment on that? I don't know if there's anybody who fishes in that sort of fishery. If anyone's got any questions throughout, then just please raise your hand. Andy Carroll, are you still on the call? Can you hear me? Just do you know when the decision's going to be made on capped licenses, sir?
Hi, Steve. Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. Yeah, we're hoping that we will go to consultation at some point this summer, and the intention, depending on how that consultation goes, if the consultation is in favour of lifting it, then we would hope to have it lifted, but permanently by the 1st January 2024.
Okay.
Thanks, Steve. That's a really good point to bring up. It's something that, yeah, as you say, has quite a big impact, isn't it? Whether it's a temporary thing or a permanent thing. So, yeah, certainly going forward, we've got no intention of not trading it in. We want to keep supporting the fishery, and if there's a possibility that it can be something that can be made of, and that may be what's partially it's pending on, then we're not going to change anything. I was just keen to see whether there were any other factors that maybe had stopped people, but that's probably quite a big factor, I would say. And also, just in relation to your like summer fishery comments, I'd agree, like Nefrots, for example, we've had some contact and have recently increased the over 10 catch limit. I think it's last week, maybe the week before, possibly, just because they've seen quite a lot of Nefrots come in recently. So, yeah, as you say, with the data lag, that's certainly a little bit behind. So we'll see an increase in some of those stocks over the summer months as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Just to make you aware that once the meeting's finished today, the RFG team will be sending out links. If there's any further questions, then you can go back to Katie and ask those questions if there's anything adjacent to ask those questions. So, okay, right. If there's no further questions around,
I think Ron had his hand up. Did you have a hand up, Ron?
Sorry, Ron.
Can't hear you, Ron.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. I think the limit on the sole should be kept. The trade. I think that we have 2 or 3 boats back from the North Sea. The Nethrops fishery isn't working too bad at the moment. I think we'll have a fair indication of the bycatch with the soles and the brills a little bit later. So I think that we should keep things as they are. I think that's important. I can't really see any investment on sole gear because of the investment that is going to be required and the money layout. I think these are difficult times for the fishing industry to start looking at doing things like that. I think we need to be a bit more confident that the species are on the ground and there's going to be regularity of that. In the 7A, it's not so bad in the summer. The problem is of course, with the winter. And I think that we'll probably come on to that later on with the skates and the rays in particular. So I think we should keep what we've got for the moment and just keep an eye on it. Thank you.
Thanks, Ron. Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, if there's no more questions, then we'll move on to our next agenda item, which is Courtney talking a little bit about the Northwest Initiative and Kat introducing
Steve, you're
herself.
jumping ahead
Steve,
slightly.
we've just got one more graph. I think we've got the skates and rays.
Oh,
to
sorry,
do.
sorry, I thought you'd finished.
Yeah.
That's all right. So we can just have a look at the skates and rays. So, as was mentioned, that we've got the skates and rays. Again, with the allocation for 6 and 7, we've got this year we received 518 tons for the under 10s and 125 tons for the over 10s. In terms of uptake, that has previously been around the kind of 430 ton mark for the past couple of years. And as was talked about, you can see the blocks for winter, so kind of August, September and October are the biggest blocks there. So that's kind of when we would expect to see that fishery to peak. But uptake so far is kind of slightly behind what it has been the past couple of years. But once we get that data through, that should be kind of similar. The catch limit is currently at 10 tons for the under 10s and 8 tons for the over 10s. And here we've just got mine and Katie's details. So like was talked about, if you would like any changes in catch limits, we're always available to take calls, or if there's any questions about uptake or why catch limits are what they are, absolutely happy to take any calls or questions. So feel free to note down both our phone numbers, and then there's an email address there which goes to both of us. So if you'd rather communicate via text, email, phone call, we're happy whatever way.
Okay, thank you very much, Katie and Jacob, for that. I will now hand over to Courtney and Kat.
Thank you for your enthusiasm. Give me 2 seconds just to share my screen very briefly. Oh, I'll move everyone back over here. Can you let me know if you've got the screen?
Yep, I can see that.
Fabulous. Put that up. So, hi everyone. For those of you that don't know me, I am Courtney and I lead the regional fisheries groups in the MMO. As Steve said, we're here today to give you a quick update on the Northwest Initiative, along with introducing Kat Wignall. So, for those of you that don't know, just give you an idea of what the Northwest Initiative is. After challenges experienced by the Northwest industry, including kind of recruitment into the industry and being able to fish full time, the NFFO hired a consultant last year to review the fishing industry and identify key areas which are causing difficulty. So Nathan, the consultant, he looked at some of the main landing sites across the Northwest and considered everything from fishing opportunities to supply chains, logistics, road networks, market access, the full lot. We have sent a summary of the full report through to members of the RFG, but if anyone doesn't have that, please let us know in the chat, or we can send it through with the meeting notes as well. Since that report was delivered, there was 12 recommendations that were put down, and one of those recommendations was to set up a steering group with representatives from across the full supply chain. So that's what we've done as of middle of last year. Since then, the steering group has met a few times over the past year. They finalised the description for the Northwest Regional Manager, which was another recommendation by the report. And Seafish went out to recruit for that at the end of last year and has now successfully recruited, with Kat Wignall taking that place. What they have also done is determine the Seafood Action Plan, which is the first key priorities for the Northwest Regional Manager to take on. So very roughly, those are listed on the slide there. So very early stuff will be developing and strengthening the community and the connections across the Northwest industry. They'll also be analysing doing market analysis and audience profiling to see kind of what the consumer base looks like and what else the businesses can be doing in the area, as well as multiple other things. What I should say is, while this list is the first priorities determined by the steering group, this is not an exclusive list, and it is not the end of the list either. This will be reviewed kind of fairly regularly alongside the Northwest Regional Manager. As we mentioned, Kat has taken on this role, so I'm going to now hand over to Kat, who will be able to give you a little bit of a introduction to herself.
Afternoon, everyone. Hope you can all hear me all right. I've had some trouble with this headset. Can you hear me, Steve?
Yes, we can hear you fine, thank you.
Nice one. All right. Hello, Courtney. Hiya, everybody. So I've come over to Seafish in April. So I've not been here that long. I've also got a copy of the 2 documents Courtney's just mentioned. So I've got the Northwest Seafood Action Plan and the executive summary that came out of Nathan's report. The details I have aren't vastly different from what Courtney's got at the minute, to be honest. I've only got a basic outline of how things will start. So Seafish took this on as more of a liaison type role. So obviously with the Marine Management Organisation, it's regulated. It's, you know, it's more to do with the regulation and enforcement, whereas Seafish, there's a lot more variation. So I can liaise between all the different sectors involved in the Northwest. So the processors, the fish merchants, the catching sector, the fishermen, any business really that has anything to do with the seafood industry in the Northwest. I'm well aware that as the years have gone on, there's been a decline in the Northwest. It's almost like it's been forgotten about, really, sadly. It's a shame. I've lived here all my life on the Fylde coast. I volunteer with the Coast Guard and the RNLI, and I'm very passionate about helping the fishermen because my stepdad was a fisherman, and I know how hard it is to try and make a living through that industry, really. We've had a bit of progress so far, only over the past 2 or 3 weeks, in that a grant has been awarded to the Fleetwood Fish Merchants Association. And that grant is an infrastructure grant, the UK Seafood Infrastructure Grant, and that will help the fish processors up at Fleetwood to move into the new units that have been built. These units were built a while back, actually, and they've been stood vacant as they've not been entirely suitable at the minute for the processors to go into. Also, they did have to wait for the grant money to come through as well, which finally this has now been done. So me and Steve have been there just to check everything's all above board and in order, which it is. So it's a bit of progress and a bit of good news, really, for the processors in Fleetwood. Building on that, I've been looking into, sort of in the background, really, sort of why there's no fishing boats apart from our welkers, which I think we've got a fleet of 5 boats, 5 welking vessels. I've been looking into why there's no other fishing vessels landing into Fleetwood at the minute, and been exploring sort of trying to find out different reasons, really. I've only managed to speak to one of the local fishermen so far up at Fleetwood. However, I will be going out to speak to others. Happy to visit anybody, anywhere, anytime, doesn't matter to me, morning, afternoon, evening. I'll work around the tides, I'll work around different people's business hours. Perfectly happy to go out, happy to go up to Whitehaven to visit Ron, to visit the team up in the MMO team in Whitehaven, any of the fishers up there, Barrow, Fleetwood, Liverpool, wherever I have to go, I will go and try and find out what I can do to assist, what Seafish can do to assist on promoting anything to do with seafood in the Northwest. I've been speaking with one of the local fishers about the clock auction and things like that. So it's just small bits for me so far, as I've only been in the role about 6 weeks. I'm happy, open to suggestions, happy for discussions. I will be going on to, at some point, look at you know, the study of the road transport network, i.e., are we accessible here in the Northwest? I feel we are. Are we accessible? Are we making it accessible for everybody? There's all sorts of different things, like Courtney said. Seafish involve a lot of different things. They're quite big on branding and marketing, so bringing back sort of the brand of Northwest fish, really, like it was once back in the day. Fleetwood was a massive fishing port, as were others. So there's a lot to look into. But I will make sure everybody has my contact number, my email address, going forward, and I will be available for anything that that crops up. Hope that's okay as a bit of an introduction from myself, but if there's anything anybody wants to ask, feel free.
Kat, I just say the same if there's any questions. Ron's up.
Yeah.
You're on.
How are you doing there?
All right.
I think you've got a job on your hands. I don't think
I'd
there's any
agree.
doubt about that at all. We first started with the Northwest Initiative going back till February of 2021. I did a report on behalf of the problems in the Northwest to the NFFO. That was discussed. We had meetings with Richard Hoskins of the MMO in the same year, and that resulted in Nathan Rosario and his consultant's report in 22. You've touched upon some of the issues that are really a problem in the Northwest. One is the geographical isolation from the markets. The problem that exists here, in addition to the isolation, is what you're able to catch in the winter months for those that don't go scalloping. You're really then reliant on the skate, which the landers will show that there is evidence of plenty of skate knocking about. The problem is getting a price for it, and that's where the buyers, have to come in. I've spoken to Patrick Ayton in Fleetwood a couple of times about why boats don't go into Fleetwood, and I think the reference really was about some of the boats that we get in Whitehaven, which the Irish fleet, and they've been here for the last sort of 3 weeks. Fair old landings of the Nethros, which tend to go to the northeast, but so does the prime fish. And I think that's where the interest is, that here we have a Northwest Initiative and Northwest buyers, but they're being bypassed. And the reason why they're bypassed is, one is a logistical one, where it goes on the same vehicle as the prawns go on. So it's easy to put the fish that as a bycatch that goes with the prawns to the northeast, and they go on to the North Shields market. And to be honest, the North Shields market isn't too bad when you're looking at some of the returns that we've got back yesterday on the prawn, on the Dover soles and and even on the skate. So if we're targeting, and looking at Fleetwood and the merchants in Fleetwood, I think that there's got to be a realization. You get what you pay for. If we can find a way with the merchants of either being here, and I'm talking about in the top end of Cumbria, you know what I mean, where they were picking up, that may well help. What we've tried in the past, if you don't mind me going on for a little bit, is that we tried both Maryport at Brixham and ourselves at Lowestoft, and good prices at those locations. But the manner of transport in small transits, going on a 14-hour run round trip into Lowestoft with the cost of the transport diesel, offsets what you were getting in those markets, which were better than what you'd get in the north. So I think it's trying to, that's the conundrum of being able to deal with what we land, how it's picked up, and where it goes to, because you've got the additional problems of getting your boxes back. So even if we were picking up at Penrith on the M6 for what was landed in the northwest, you still got the problem of coming back for your boxes, the empties, to pick them up, to bring them back home, to put them back aboard the boat. So there are a number of issues which are interlinked, which will be solved if there's a willingness to do so. You know what I mean? Because we will look whether we send in prawns to Prestwick in Scotland, or we send them to Corker Island, or we send them to 55 in North Shields. The fish will go with them unless there's an attraction for us to separate those, the prime and the fish, to go somewhere else if the price is right, or if there's something here which can be accommodated. So we do away with the cost of transport and the agents would pick up here. So I think there are ways and means of looking at that. One comment that you picked up, and it may well have been from conversations you've had with Seafish. You're dead right about Seafish having no connection with the Northwest. You know, I think there's been a realization when I've spoken to Seafish that they say, sorry, we're going to have to do something about that. So there's got to be a greater connection between Seafish and the industry, you know, in the Northwest. And that's the start as well.
Yeah.
Sorry about going on for a bit there, Chairman.
No worries, Ron.
No problem. Yeah, it's all valid points.
It is definitely valid points and valid issues from my perspective, and I'm looking forward to being able to meet you in person, Ron, because then we can have a proper good discussion of looking at ways we can progress. Like I said, I'm happy to come up that way if needed in the future, not so distant future.
Yeah. On that, actually, Kat, I just had a discussion with Dan Wardle today about coordinating it. So if you're coming up here and with Dan as well, and somebody from my team, sort of look at going out together, and potentially someone from the IFCAS as well.
Oh, brilliant!
To go out together and sort of, so we know when we're going to be going to the different ports in the Northwest.
Yeah,
I think it was quite successful when we went out last time. With the RFG. So we want to sort of build on that, really.
Definitely, and we'll let you know, Ron, so that you can work in with us. We can work in with you as well. It'll be very good to speak with you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Kat. Any more questions for Kat? Right, in that case, I'll move on. So the next session then is on about grants. We did talk a little bit about grants there, about the Fleetwood merchants. So we have Kate, who's just appeared, and Matt. So are you gonna concentrate on the UK seafood sort of grants?
Both.
Okay.
We've got a presentation on the Fisheries and Seafood Scheme as well as the UK Seafood Fund. Yeah, they're covering both. Okay,
great. All right, if you're happy to go ahead, I'll hand you over.
Yeah, cheers, Steve. And hello.
Just 1 second, sorry. Ron, did you have a question around grants, or was that related to something else? Your hand's still up.
I'm sorry, no. Not me, no.
Sorry, bear with me. Sorry, I'm back. I just had to maneuver my screens around. Yeah, hello. Thank you for inviting us along to present. My name is Kate and I am a policy advisor in the fisheries funding team in DEFRA. And Matt is also here if you wanted to say hi, Matt.
Yeah, thanks, Kate. Hi, everyone. Yeah, thanks for inviting us. Matt, I work on the same team as Kate. My name's Matt Darlison, so nice to meet you all.
Yeah, so as I just said, I'm going to cover the two fisheries funding schemes available to England. So that's the Fisheries and Seafood Scheme and the UK Seafood Fund. So yeah, firstly, we have England's domestic scheme, which is the Fisheries and Seafood Scheme, or the FAS as we shorten it to. And this opened in April 2021, and is the repatriated funding provided by government since EU exit. and just under 33 million is split annually to each of the four UK fishing administrations, and 6 billion is made available in England through the FAS. And the scheme aims to deliver investments that will safeguard the long-term sustainability, resilience and prosperity of the seafood sector across England. And then we also have the UK Seafood Fund. So the FAS is more kind of aimed at local projects supporting either individual or multiple businesses. And the UK Seafood Fund generally is like aimed at like larger projects with multiple beneficiaries. And of course, it's UK wide as well. Yeah, the UK Seafood Fund was announced in late 2020, and it's a £100 million fund available until March 2025. And it was set up to support the long-term future and sustainability of the UK fisheries and seafood sector. And some of the main objectives are to reform and modernise infrastructure, bring economic growth to coastal communities, and enable an environmentally sustainable fishing industry as well. And as you can see, funding is split 3 ways. So we've got the infrastructure scheme, which has at least 65 million going towards it. So infrastructure has kind of become a broad term, but we had the first couple of rounds that were supporting large infrastructure projects. And then we had our fleet modernisation round, which is support for the wild catching sector. And we also have our recreational sea fishing sector to support that side of the industry. We have 24 million for science and innovation, which is split between the Seafood Innovation Fund and the Fisheries Industry Science Partnership Scheme, and up to 10 million for skills and training projects. Just wanted to go over in this slide how much we've committed through both the Fisheries and Seafood Scheme and the UK Seafood Fund. So on the Fisheries and Seafood Scheme, we have spent over 13 million across 750 projects since 2021, with funding going towards SMEs, sole traders, and vast majority going to micro entities. And in terms of the UK Seafood Fund, nearly half of the total budget has now been committed to big infrastructure projects, skills and training projects, and over 100 science and innovation projects. And then over the coming months, we plan to commit most of the remaining budget. And on these slides, you can click through these links and it has a page of what projects have been funded and have been successful. So yeah, also just wanted to cover what is currently open and what funding opportunities remain open. So the Fisheries and Seafood Scheme is a rolling opportunity and it remains open for applications throughout the year. There are lots of different types of eligible projects to mention. However, the team would like to promote the fact that higher rates of support are given for community/cooperative projects, and that we will also fund projects that improve the marine environment as well. And again, you can obviously visit the page for further information as well. And the UK Seafood Fund was delivered a bit differently. So it had different funding rounds with different deadlines for applications. So the infrastructure round 4 is still open, and that's for recreational sea fishing. So that's for projects that support that area, with up to £100,000 in funding available per project. And finally, we have a funding round open to help modernise the small scale coastal fleet. So with this, an initial 2 million has been made available until the 31st of October. And essentially this is acting as a trial to gather evidence to inform future funding opportunities for the catching sector. So as it stands, currently we will provide up to £40,000 for a new electric or hybrid engine, or up to 20,000 for a new and more efficient diesel petrol engine. And following this pilot, a further 8 million will be made available to the catching sector. So we chose to focus the trial on a sector of the fleet that we have very little data on, and test these new technologies within the small scale coastal fleet where we know electric / hybrid engines are available. But depending on the results of the evaluation, there's scope to extend the eligibility of this round following the pilot. And again, those links also work and take you to more information. And then finally, we wanted to share a timeline with you. So we plan to announce awards from our final science and innovation rounds very soon, with further infrastructure and skills and training announcements planned for the summer. And towards the back end of the year, we will also announce a successful recreational fishing project and close the current fleet modernisation round, and obviously review it and expand the eligibility if so. And yeah, that's the end of my slides, but very welcome for any questions, or of course for myself and Matt to be emailed with any question later on.
Okay, thank you very much. We also have Georgia from the MMO grants teams on the call as well at the moment, so if anyone got any questions for any of them.
I was just going to say, Kate, could you put a link to the slides or the presentation, or email the presentation or something like that, just so I've got a copy of that?
Yeah,
please?
yeah, of course. Yeah.
I'll put
We'll
my email
send it
address in
out
the
with
chat
the
as well.
notes.
All right, great, thank you.
Has there been much interest in the re-engineering?
Not a great response, which is why it is currently being reviewed at the moment to expand the eligibility in order to get more interest. Yeah.
I think it's like.
Sorry, go on.
Sorry to cut it. I was just going to say, I think, and it's so we've obviously highlighted on the slide there that the round is due to close for applications at the end of October. So it's kind of either the end of October or before the money runs out. So that's what we've said publicly. But given the feedback that we've had for the scheme, and given the I'd say the lack of uptake, interest hasn't been as strong as I think would have liked. We may well we are reviewing what we can do to the round. I think much earlier, and potentially looking to do something with the eligibility. So don't be surprised to see or hear some earlier announcements on that. Yeah, just wanted to say that. Sorry.
No, thanks, Matt.
Yeah, I think has there been some trials done on purely electric fishing boats? Do we know? Because obviously there's been some hesitancy about the health and safety sort of elements if you run out of electricity when you're at sea and things like that. I I've been speaking to some fishermen, and when I was in Northern Ireland yesterday, I was speaking to them about. I think that looking at day runners that where it wouldn't be as much of a problem, but has there been much sort of feedback on that? I think people have been quite hesitant, haven't they, changing over.
Was that a question for
Sorry,
myself?
Kate, yeah, I was just
Yeah.
just saying if there's any sort of engagement you've had on it, I was just out of interest why there hasn't been much of an uptake. I mean, as I said, from people I've spoken to, I think there's a little bit of hesitancy. Once being able to change that electric, it depends on your port sort of infrastructure, but also how long you're out and other things.
I'm not too sure personally. Because I work really closely on the skills and training element. And it's another member of the team who leads the fleet modernisation.
I think there's I think if we're completely honest, I think that there's obviously some hesitancy within the industry about electric and hybrid engines, if we're completely honest. And we've the feedback that we've had with speaking to the regional fisheries group lately and other engagement sessions that we've had with industry over the past few months, there's concern that if we're honest, that the infrastructure just might not be there for electric engines. But so I think going back to the pilot that Kate spoke about before, I think that's one of the reasons why we wanted to start with a small scale coastal fleet, because I think that's a section of the fleet that we'd like to think are probably ready for those types of engines. But there's a big piece of work to do, I think, to increase confidence in people, increase people's confidence in those types of engines, and that work is still ongoing and still needs to take place. So yeah, don't know if that answers the question, but just coming on that there.
Okay, thank you very much. As I said, if there's any further questions, then go to Kate and Matt or to our MMO grants team as well. Right, next on the agenda then is IVMS. So as I said, we have Pete Clark on the line as well to talk about the MMO's position on IVMS and what the implications of what's happened recently on that. Hi, Pete.
Hi, Steve. Good afternoon, everyone. Let's just take a little step back, so everyone's kind of got a common understanding of where we are. So the IVMS project was based on type approval. That was what was decided would be our route to market. In other words, how we would go about identifying devices that we would want fitted onto the under 12 fleet. The type approval basically set out a specification, a technical specification, a very detailed technical specification that devices had to meet, and we went through various rounds of interactions with potential suppliers to ensure that they met them, and there were certain things that they needed external verification of. So, for example, water ingress is sort of an international standard, and we needed somebody to certify that their devices met that standard. So we got down to a list of 4 devices, and those were the type approved ones that fishers were advised they could get. And then we've been working our way through the fleet from the smallest. From the largest of the inshore fleet down to the smallest boats in various tranches. There's nothing to stop people getting ahead of the game and getting their device, but we've sort of focused our effort and energy in these tranches as we onboard more boats. At this present moment in time, there's no legal requirement, but there is grant money, and we've been working with industry to encourage and assist them to get devices attached to their boat and to get them connected in advance of a statutory instrument and secondary legislation that does make it mandatory. Obviously, when we will get to a point when the grant funding ceases and the law changes so that it is mandatory, and the idea is to basically have everything in place by then. And the reason behind this project is because it gives us a much better data set to assist with fisheries management, because we will know you know what the fleet is doing, where they're fishing. We'll be able to match up that data with catch recording and catch app data and various other data sets, which will give us a really well-rounded picture and allow us to manage stocks much more efficiently. So that's kind of the background to the project and how we went about it. We received some information both from our own systems and from externally, from a number of external sources, to suggest that some of the devices that have been attached to boats weren't performing as they should be. So we took the decision to undertake some independent testing of each of the devices. So we contacted the 4 suppliers. We asked them to send us a device that we would put through a set of tests, and we employed an independent technical testing company to basically run the rule over these devices, put them through a number of tests to determine to what extent they did meet the criteria which they should. And unfortunately, all 4 of those devices did actually fail the test to some or to greater or lesser extent. So we then sat down with the 4 suppliers. We gave them a copy of their test report. We went through it with the technical team and the independent testers, and we explained where they'd failed. And some of them were very minor and easily rectifiable, and others were more sort of fundamental failures. And we basically gave each, having had that sort of detailed technical conversation with them, we gave each of the suppliers a period of 2 weeks to go away and then come back with a plan as to how they were going to rectify the faults within a reasonable period of time. Of the 4 suppliers, Fulcrum and Suckerfish came back with very detailed plans that set out how they would meet the failings of their devices within that reasonable time period. We were able to accept their plans, and they're currently putting them through, and we will retest their devices, and then we will move forward with those. 2 of the suppliers, the other 2 suppliers, which are Maritime Systems and SatLink. In the case of SatLink, they just didn't reply. They didn't submit a plan how they were going to rectify their failings. Therefore, having missed the deadline, the decision was taken that their type approval, or the type approval for their device, would be revoked. Maritime Systems came back with a plan that did not provide the MMO with confidence that they would rectify the failings of their device within a reasonable period of time. All of the suppliers had exactly the same opportunity. They all had exactly the same time with our technical team and the test suppliers, and they were all given the same amount of time to submit a detailed plan. Maritime Systems did not do that, and therefore their type approval was revoked. Now, we've been pretty clear from the outset, and hopefully it's come across in our communications, that we want to continue with the rollout of IVMS devices to the fleet, because it will provide us with that really helpful and valuable data. But we do not expect these developments to adversely impact fishers. So we're working with the 2 remaining suppliers, and we're working through with the grants team on the art of the possible in terms of how we actually go about removing Maritime Systems devices. There aren't any SatLink devices to remove because they didn't sell any. We're working to come up with a plan for how we will remove those maritime devices and replace them with one of the 2 remaining type approved devices. And obviously we will continue to communicate as that plan takes shape. But our underlying assumption on all of this is that fishers will not be impacted financially by having to have a second device fitted to their boat. If you've got a Suckerfish device, if you've got a Fulcrum device, you don't need to worry at all. If you've got a maritime device, you don't have to have it connected at this point, because it's the statutory instrument is not in place. So the fact that any contract you've had or any airtime connection has been switched off is really neither here nor there at that stage. We just advise you, A, not to try and remove the device yourself. wait until we contact you. We will send an engineer to remove that device and replace it with the device of your choice from the 2 remaining suppliers. So really, it's just a question of hold fire, and we will get back to you with further information on what we intend to do. I will be honest, there will be a certain amount of disruption to you. Hopefully it will be inconvenience and nothing more, because ultimately you're going to have to be around at some point for us to take that device off and fit the new one. But financially, it shouldn't impact you any more than simply just the inconvenience of having to be there when the engineers come, and we're working with them to sort of come up with a program of work, so that we kind of, you know, we hit a particular location for a couple of days or whatever it might be to do them all at once, rather than just kind of keep pinging it backwards and forwards. So in summary, if you've got a fulcrum or a suckerfish device, just carry on as normal. You won't have a sat-link device. If you've got a maritime system device, just wait to hear further from us. Don't touch it in the meantime. Don't worry if it's not transmitting, and we will provide further information in due course. There's a lot of noise, it's fair to say, going on at the moment. Maritime systems are being you know, quite vocal. It's fair to say the MMO does not agree with much of what's being said. Please, you know, sort of look out for communications from us, because that is clearly the official line. That's really all I wanted to say. I appreciate it's been a difficult period, and I'm happy to take any questions on that. And if I can't answer them, I'll make sure someone does get back to you with a response.
I'd like to make a comment. Brian Phillipson, can I make a comment?
By all means.
Hello?
Yeah, I can hear you. Go ahead.
Right, can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes,
right.
I can hear you.
There's a few things. One is, why didn't you test these kit before you started installing them? 2 is, what happened to the airtime we was promised that we wouldn't have to pay, and it was set to a certain date, and now we've overrun that date, so our free airtime's gone out the window. So that's a financial hit for the fishing industry. 3 is, you say it's to gather information, so therefore, will it be used in any enforcement?
Okay, so on one, I wasn't here at the time that the decision was made not to test these devices in advance. I would imagine that there will be some form of review of that, but as I say, at the moment we are focusing very much on sort of moving forward rather than looking backwards. I know it sounds a bit trite for me to say it happened before my time, but that's the reality, I'm afraid. I wasn't around, and I can't comment on the decisions that were made at the time. With regard to the airtime, we do not, I mean, the airtime, the free airtime that came with the packages is something that we will kind of work through with the remaining suppliers, and you know, whether that's part of the replacement deal that's going to be put forward. There is no requirement. I mean, as I understand it, the free airtime was kind of for the period between the device being installed and it becoming a legal requirement that you actually were transmitting.
Yeah,
now, obviously,
you moved the goalposts on the legal requirement, so that directly affected our airtime.
Well,
it's not our fault that you moved the goalposts, is it? And now we're being financially impacted by this.
Well, at this stage, you're not, because we don't know what the, you know, what the you know, it's I can't comment on the exact detail of what the arrangements will be when we restart the program. We are very conscious of the fact that airtime is a cost that sits up above the cost of the device and the installation, and we are looking at that.
Now, this is a package you made us fit at a certain time. You actually threatened us with losing the grant if we didn't have it fitted at certain times. I know it moved more times than what, you know what I mean, no times, but we took this package out on the information you give us. Now, the information you give us has turned out to be totally wrong. and the airtime what we took the packages out on has turned out to be wrong. So that is a financial hit on us.
So all I can say on that is, can we come back to that when we've worked through it, because we're aware of the fact that people were given airtime that was to take them through to a point in time when we envisaged that there would be
And past when it was envisaged to be operated. We got something like 2 years free airtime, but now that's all gone by the board. So that's a financial hit that we're going to have to take because of, well, really speaking, your incompetence, to be quite honest with you.
So at this stage, you don't have to have an airtime contract because there's no legal requirement, and there won't be until it looks like next year.
The legal requirement. You moved it, not me. Now my airtime's being affected because you've moved the goalposts, because you've not stuck to what you said.
Yeah, I accept the fact that the change in the law has moved back to next year, but there isn't a gap between now and then that you need to fill, that you need to be transmitting to the device.
But that's my free airtime going out the window. It's quite easy to see. I've got 2 years free airtime. They give me 2 years free airtime. Now that 2 years free airtime is going to be used up because you didn't bring it in when you said. So I'll be paying from when it becomes legal straight away.
Yeah, so that may be the case.
So I've been missold something there, haven't I?
Well, as to whether you've been missold it, I can't really comment because I wasn't there at the time, and I don't know, when you took out your contract exactly what the deal was. What I'm saying to you is that the airtime issue is known to us, and that's part of what we are working through before we relaunch the project. So I appreciate, Brian, that I don't necessarily have the answers that you need here and now, but I can't say for sure whether or not you will get additional free airtime to make up that gap or not. I'm saying it's part of our considerations, and it's something that we're working through in our discussions with the remaining suppliers.
Now, another thing you said, it's for collecting data. So you're telling me it will not be used for enforcement?
No, I didn't say that.
You said it was for collecting data. You said it was for getting a better picture of where the fleet was fishing and what we. Yeah. But you didn't say it was going to be used for enforcement. Is it going to be used for enforcement?
Right. So I said the primary purpose of this project is to gain information that we can use for fisheries management. If we have evidence of breaches of the law and we've got data to support it, we retain the right to use the data from it in order to do that. That doesn't mean that's the primary purpose. It doesn't mean that we're going to be monitoring the movements of everyone all the time. However, and we will not use IVMS locational data in isolation in the same way that
I believe it has been used in the past. I believe where you've used it.
Not by the MMO. I believe that the IFCAs have used IVMS data in prosecution cases, and I can't speak for them because they're not here. But we've not used it in the past, and we would certainly not use it in isolation.
Yeah. Why has IFCA got the actual? Why can IFCA actually use the data that you basically? I mean, you're giving it to a third party there, aren't you?
So it is a bylaw that the IFCA have that requires, in order to fish in their district, you have to have an IVMS device approved. I believe it's the same in Wales as well. They are simply ahead of the game, and I can't rule out the fact that further IFCAs may decide to introduce local bylaws. That's entirely up to them.
But you're giving them the information. You're giving the information to third parties.
So there's a privacy notice that basically explains what the data is used for and may be used for. And it does make it clear that that we can share it if necessary with other law enforcement agencies and other bodies. I mean, that's perfectly normal, in the same way that footage from motorway cameras, which is there to sort of manage traffic flow, can be used if necessary, if it captures something of dangerous driving or something of that matter. So if we've got the data, it makes sense for us to use it. That isn't the primary purpose why we're collecting it, and it would be covered in the privacy statement that was issued when we went live with this.
Right. I think that's answered my questions.
Thank you, Brian. As a further question, Paul Fagan, have you got a further question?
Yeah, just luckily I've got a Fulcrum one fitted. Can I disconnect it until it becomes a legal requirement?
That's a matter between you. So there is no legal requirement for you to transmit data to us. What you've agreed in your contract with the supplier of your device, I can't comment on, but there's no requirement for you to transmit it from our end. Obviously, we want you to, we are very keen because it helps us to make sure that devices are working properly. So there's that kind of initial, getting you set up device, but period when we want your device to transmit so we can check it's working all right. And it helps us to have the data because it helps us to sort of prepare for go live. But there is no requirement from the MMO for you to be transmitting data at this point, and there won't be until the statutory instrument goes live.
Yeah, it's just, well, two reasons. The first reason is it keeps beeping away, so I always think it's an engine alarm coming in. It's just the updates on the thing. And the very first day I went to sea with it, after it had been fitted, I had 2 fisheries quads down on me straight away when I was just netting for bait on the Duddon. And as soon as I got back to the slipway, there was another fishery officer turned up on the slipway who hadn't seen for months. So it's obvious it's being used straight away because the fish officer let slip and said, oh yeah, we've seen that you're out on the VMS, which is fair enough. That's what it's being used for. But I say the main problem at the minute is it's just beeping away inconsistent timingly, and I keep thinking it's an engine alarm going off.
So I mean, we are, it helps us to be able to know where you are, because it, from the likes of Steve and his team, they don't want to drive up the coast in the hope that, if they want to speak to you, that they want to see, that you're going to be there. So it certainly helps us to have that kind of idea of where you are. As for the beeping thing, I don't know, mate. There might be a switch where you can turn it off. I appreciate it probably is a bit annoying, but I think that's that's something you have to take up with Fulcrum from their support line in terms of whether there's an option to turn it to silent.
Yeah, okie dokie, no bother.
Cheers. Thanks, Paul.
Okay, thank you very much for your questions, and thank you very much, Pete, for answering those. As I said, there will be following on from the meeting, there will be a pack going out, and there'll be contact details for the IVMS team as well if you've got any further questions relating to the rollout of a replacement and other terminals. So that will be more information will be coming out on that in due course. Right. Okay. So over to the last scheduled person to talk, which is Rebecca. If you're happy to talk about shellfish FMPs.
Hi there. Yeah, I'll just share my screen. Can you see that okay, Steve?
Yes, that's fine. You can see that fine. It's not. Well, it's not. It doesn't seem to be full screen. I'm not sure why, but if people do want to change it, if you've got a mouse, you can actually make it larger yourselves. But it's there. I think you can see it okay.
Okay. It's full screen for me. I don't know what's going on. Sorry. So hi everyone, my name is Rebecca. I am here to chat today about shellfish fisheries management plans from the Seafish Fisheries Management team. I don't have a huge update today, but I can kind of inform you of what's kind of coming ahead. And I'm just going to touch on, firstly, our collaborative fisheries management groups and how you can get involved in that, and also how they've been involved in developing the draft fisheries management plan up to this point. So just to begin, so Seafish facilitates 4 stakeholder groups. So we've got the Shellfish Industry Advisory Group, we've got the Crab and Lobster Management Group, the Whelk Management Group, and the recently formed last year Finfish Industry Advisory Group. So these groups are industry-led and they're based on the principles of collaborative fisheries management, and they serve as a forum for effective engagement between industry regulators and right across the supply chain. So you may have seen this before. I'm sure it's done the rounds at this stage, but in terms of group structure, you've got the SIAG is the umbrella group under which the species-specific groups sit. This group meets quarterly to focus on all overarching issues that are relevant to all shellfish fisheries in the UK. These groups, this group talks about things like animal sentience and welfare, competition for marine space, anything topical in the run-up to the meeting. So issues that are not specific to any one species, basically, or one area. This group was formed in November 2019, with a key priority work area being the development of fisheries management plans. So beneath the SIAG then, you'll see we have two species-specific subgroups, the whelk management group and the crab and lobster management group. And these bring stakeholders together to focus on fishery-specific issues. These were formed in early 2020, also meet quarterly, and one of the key things to point out here is they're very much industry-driven, industry-led. All the agenda items are what's topical again at the minute and what industry would like to see on the agenda. So we facilitate the groups at Seafish, we organise the meetings, we provide secretariat support, we pick up most of the actions which come out of the meetings, but the direction of the group, the direction is fully decided by what members who are distributed right across the crab and lobster and whelk supply chain want. Each of these groups has two subgroups. We've got an FMP development for crab, lobster and whelk being progressed by FMP working groups, and then the supporting science and research plans which will sit alongside the FMP have been progressed by the science subgroups. You'll see the Scallop Industry Consultation Group on there as well. This is a longer standing group. It does fall under the SIAG umbrella, but the King Scallop FMP is being delivered through a co-management group, the SICG Working Group, which is an industry-led group made up of reps from right across the fishing industry and all UK fisheries administrations. So we sit on that working group and drafting group as well, and we facilitate all the engagement around the King Scallop FMP. So just to touch on the Finfish group structure, this is very much a work in progress as it is a relatively new group. It was formed last year and it provides a forum to discuss sustainability and management of the Finfish fisheries. This group is a point of contact for all matters relating to the UK's non-quota Finfish species. And in February of this year, Seafish presented this kind of outline to the FIAG members on how the network of subgroups could look going into the future. And it follows the kind of structure of the SIAG and their subgroups. So yeah, that's a work in progress, and any questions on that, I'll direct them to my colleague Oscar, who's been kind of involved with the Finfish group from the beginning. So just to move on to fisheries management plans very quickly. So in England, DEFRA commissioned Seafish in March 2020 to be the delivery lead on 2 of the 6 frontrunner FMPs that cover English waters, the brown crab and the European lobster, and the whelk FMP. And we also support, like I said, the SICG working group to develop the King Scallop FMP in English and Welsh waters. These 3 FMPs are part of the Tranche 1 and have been prioritised for delivery first. And the FMPs will deliver objectives of the Fisheries Act with species-specific objectives around managing fishing effort, data gathering and evidence-based management, climate change adaptation and mitigation, and minimising environmental impacts of fishing activities. So the aim of these FMPs will hopefully set the direction of travel for the future management of UK fisheries. So how we approached the work when it came to, we were responsible for co-designing the content. We involved our species management groups from the beginning in terms of the FMP working groups and the science groups in drafting all the FMP content. We engaged with our stakeholders and developed a stakeholder engagement plan to ensure industry were actively involved in our work. And then we reviewed and refined the work, amending draft FMPs on the basis of the feedback we received when we went out for informal engagement. So just some highlights of the stakeholder engagement. We travelled around the UK, as you'll see from the map there, the blue representing scallop, the orange representing crab, and the purple representing whelk. There is a few places missing off that map, I think, at this point, but we went out to raise awareness about the purpose of the FMP. We wanted to test and gather feedback on the proposed aims and objectives that we had already drafted, and also to discuss management options suitable for delivering the objectives. We engaged over 500 stakeholders in the process, across all sectors via email, phone, letters and in-person events. We also had a number of online drop-in sessions as well for stakeholders to attend if they wished. So what's included in each FMP? So when we handed up the FMPs over to DEFRA at the beginning of the year, this is how the FMPs were going to look. There was going to be an executive summary at the beginning, which would be 2 pages, and this would set out how the FMP looks, the content of the FMP, and kind of just a general summary of what the FMP is going to include. Got a forward, there's the scope of the FMP and the status of the fisheries, the shared principles and the FMP objectives, and also the implementation, the monitoring and the review process that would follow FMP implementation. So the next steps really, the FMP went to DEFRA at the beginning of the year. Like I said, it underwent many review processes. It started off with the gateway review, under which Seafish sat in front of a panel who asked multiple questions. They fed back to us. We made some additions to the FMP, some edits, sent back to DEFRA. It's now undergone another review by DEFRA senior management and legal, and it's pending sign off to go to number 10, I believe, and which public consultation and engagement events will follow in the summer. We do not have a date as of yet. We're still waiting on DEFRA to come back to us on that. There is discussions that there will be some type of roadshow to mimic what the work that Seafish did late last year in terms of engagement, how that will look, dates. No idea how that will look at the moment. So just keep a watching brief on this, and then hopefully it will get signed off by Secretary of State and be published in late 2023. There was an article published in Fishing News last week. I'll send the link in the chat that kind of gave an overview of outcomes from the stakeholder engagement that we held last year and kind of the sentiments that came from stakeholders on that. So I'll send the link in the chat. But happy to take any questions if I can. If not, I'll make sure to get some answers for you and get back to you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Tracy. If there's no questions for Tracy. One of the things, Tracy, was in the Northwest, it's obviously very complicated, the fisheries management plans with the devolved administrations in the IFCA and the Isle of Man. So we've got Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland, Isle of Man, Northwest IFCA and ourselves. And obviously further west, they've got the Irish as well. So it's those sort of differences in the regulations. It's more areas where you could be in each other's waters. It becomes quite complex for fishermen.
Yeah, that came up at a lot of our stakeholder engagement events, and how even just on a local management level, how the IFCA interactions are going to be from the different jurisdictions and how it's going to interact with the FMP, but that'll be very much up to DEFRA at this point. And when we handed it over to DEFRA at the beginning of the year, we haven't had much to do with the FMP. So how it's going to look at public consultation when it's released to it, we have no hand or part in it now, because it's very much DEFRA property. So I can't really comment on how it's going to look, as we're awaiting public consultation as well. So I'm sure that's been given a lot of thought, because it was one of our points that kept coming up in our stakeholder engagement, is how they're all going to interact with each other. But there is a lot of conversations between all the devolved administrations on how they will interact with each other once the FMPs are implemented. Sorry, can't really give you a better answer than that.
No, that's fine. Thank you very much for that. So any questions for Tracy before we move on?
Got Paul Ferguson's got his hand up. I was saying he's got his hand up.
I see Paul's hand up. Did you have your hand up, Paul?
No, I did before, but I didn't. Not recently.
But it's shown up.
I can't see anything on there. So okay, thank you very much, Rebecca, for that. And I'll move on to the next agenda item, then, which is any other business. So there's a couple of points from myself on this, just to cover. The first one is to do with catch recording. So the setting up with catch recording, we're setting up a 1 second, I just need to get to it. Lex Palmer from the MMO Service Management team setting up a focus group to try and gather fishers' sort of feedback on the catch recording for under 10s and how that would be developed going forward and any sort of issues they've got with it. So if anyone wants to get involved in that, expected to meet every sort of 3 months, just like a call like this on Teams, it'll probably be. Then you can just the details will go out to how to join that group if you want to join that. Next one then was wind farms. There were some questions about concerns really about wind farms, and there's 3 projects in the Irish Sea. I'll just do a quick share screen so you can see where those are. So planning at the moment, these decisions were made by the Planning Inspectorate, PINS Planning Inspectorates and the National Infrastructure Projects. So the decision on whether to go ahead with them is outside the MMO's hands, but then once the decision is made, if they do go ahead, then the marine licensing team, then we get involved in the conditions that will be attached to the to those construction of those wind farms. So as you can see, there's 3 new proposed ones. There has been some consultation. Tom Watson's been going out as well to consulting on these on behalf of the developers. So there's the Morgan one and the Morecambe one in English waters, and well, the Morgan one covers a little, I think, into Alabama waters, and then the Mona one off Wales. So they're quite big sort of areas there on top of the wind farms that we already have. At the moment, the decision, the consultation for any public people who want to comment on the development of the wind farm, I think that's closed last weekend.
Sunday.
Yeah, so I think that closed on Saturday or Sunday, the consultation on that. So basically it'll come into the MMO as a license application to go ahead with them. And once we get to that stage, then obviously any conditions that are attached to it, that'll be developed. There were some particular concerns, I think, there's been with migratory fish and also like shellfish spat as well, how it would potentially affect that. So as part of that, process for building them, it would be looked at whether it needs an environmental impact assessment or the involvement of CFAS, and other sort of scientific bodies. We'd have to see if that was good, that would be part of the license conditions. Okay. Again, if there's any other questions on the sort of the wind farm projects, then it can be fed in through the process. There was also a question that came in regarding whether there's any moves to sort of change the bass regulations, so any easing of whether they could be caught by drift nets. That'll be going, we'll forward that onto the bass FMP team. I think there's likely to be any developments until sort of the fisheries management plans are developed a bit more. So whether that has to be considered, I think, whether what impact using drift nets to fish for bass is likely to have on stocks. Paul, did you have a question on that?
Yeah, I do, Steve. That's what I was going to mention before earlier on the quota statistics, but we used to drift net for bass when it was allowed to do, and then obviously I lobster fish as well now, so I use a small drift net to go and catch flounder for my own pot bait. So a couple of years ago, we noticed we started picking a few Dover soles up, nice few Dover soles. But I only use the short net because it gives me enough pot bait for what pots I've got. Obviously, you've got to discard the bass out of that net, but that's when they run about the gear before for the Dover soles. I would happily rig up to go drift netting for Dovers, but I'm not going to do it if I'm discarding a load of bass over the side. Knowing how the bass stocks are with what I'm picking up in my fixed gear when I go up the coast and on the front of Walney, there's plenty, and with the rods, there's definitely plenty of bass about. And my understanding of it's only what I've heard word of mouth over the last few years, but one of the reasons I heard of the drift net fishery being banned was because of the amount of bass and the length of nets that were being used down in the English Channel, mid-channel, among all, basically fishing offshore and among all the shipping lane stuff, doing well at it. But obviously that's a different ball game to what we do up here in Morecambe Bay and at the outskirts of Dudden Estuary. So I honestly do think there is scope for a small scale drift net fishery if it's properly licensed and regulated. Short nets, not like 2 mile net. I've just read this week's fishing news, and there's a chap in there said he's had to burn 2 miles drift gear. But surely there's scope there for a small licensed fishery, say 400 or 500 yard per boat, and especially if the IVMS is coming in, you can see when we're out. So like I say, there's a sole fishery there. There's plenty of dovers turning up, but I can't really target them without trucking a load of bass back. So I've commented and had it in the with Policy Lab and any of the emails and stuff I've had. I've made my thoughts clear on it. It's just it's a shame, and like we're saying, there's no boats in the northwest. I think there'd be a potential for more boats to come into the fishery, certainly in the Ferns area, if we were allowed to go small scale drift netting for the bass. Because certainly I know the science it's definitely, I wouldn't say it's wrong, it's just lacking, it's behind, you know what I mean? It's taking time to catch up. And it's like the chicken and the egg syndrome is saying, oh, well, there's not a lot of bass getting landed via nets, but then it's not getting landed via fixed nets because we're capped on what we can land, sort of thing. But I definitely think it needs looking into, because I think it'd be a good little fishery there. Let's say regulated and policed correctly.
Yeah, I think the reason and there was a general EU a few years ago, general EU ban on drift net fishing at all, and then the UK sort of kicked back because of the bass fishery, but it didn't come in when, so it was still banned then. I think it'd have to be taken into consideration with how it would be done. I mean, FMPs are coming in and supposed to be looked at a local level as well, so whether that could potentially come in. I think it would have to see the reasoning why. I mean, one of the issues with drift nets, I think, was a little bit of bycatch of cetaceans and things like that as well, and there was other reasons for it. But I think we'd have to look at the science behind it, and then they would have to consider that as part of the FMP process. But part of that, it was when it was the EU, you couldn't drift net for bass, but we're not part of the EU anymore. So whether that could be considered now going forward, that the UK is making its own regulations, I think we'd have to look at it in terms of why it was banned in the first place, or why it wasn't allowed to be a permitted method of fishing. See if that could be brought back, but we'll certainly feed it back into the team, and they can look at that. And as you said, you've done it yourself, and I think you need to look at it on a local basis. Part of the stuff of making sure that we're not discarding fish. If you're in sole fishery and you're having to discard the bass, that would have to be considered, because the landing obligation only applies to quota species, but it should be across the fishery about just if you're going to have to discard stuff, it's not good for fisheries management. So I think it would have to be considered. Do you want to come in as well, Kat, on that?
Yeah, sorry. Basically, well, I can see exactly where Paul's coming from there, to be honest, and it has been mentioned by other fishers as well. When we myself and Lizzie, Andy and Dixon, actually, we sort of facilitated the Policy Lab researchers coming to visit the Northwest last summer, and there was some good discussions then around the abundance of bass really around that area. The only thing I want to ask is, was there a follow-up from the two ladies that visited from Policy Lab? They were taking all the information from everywhere they'd visited in the UK back to the research base, and then something I think was going to come out from that regarding the bass fisheries management policy, but I've had nothing at all. And I'm just wondering, I don't know if you know, Courtney, I don't know who would know, what was the outcome of that? Because I sat there with the fishermen, with Lizzie, with Ian from the IFCA, and we had this discussion, and then I've heard absolutely nothing back from it.
Yeah, I'm not sure personally, but what we can do is we'll just get in touch with DEFRA, because they'll have the Policy Lab report, and we'll see kind of whether they came back, did a follow up, just took everything down, that kind of thing. See what they've got available to them, what we can share. So we'll get back in touch with you, Paul and Kat.
Yeah,
Send
it'd
it
be
direct to you.
interesting. Yeah.
I mean, let's say we used to, historically, back in the early all through 2000s, we used to drift net for bass. And if you've seen the difference with a drift net coming aboard, targeting bass, or a fixed net taking bass as a bycatch, I mean, the fixed netting is just it's a disaster with your spotted dogfish, your crabs, even lobsters that you're getting that you're not particularly targeting with the net. Weed, it's like the drift net fishery. I know they've had issues with cetaceans down south, but I think we only ever had one live porpoise on the Duddon in about 15 years of netting. Because its mate was alongside the net waiting as we cut the net off it, away they went, a pair of them. It's the only one I've ever seen in the net. But it's a very clean fishery, and it's just a shame to lose it really when there's a stock there to go at. Like I say, but it does want to be heavily regulated because that keeps the markets keen as well.
Yeah.
So, but I think like we've mentioned in these meetings before, a regional approach to management, that's definitely the way forward, because I know the rod and line fishing's good down south because they've got the clear waters. You go into Morecambe Bay, 9 times out of 10 it's like chocolate, so, which is good for netting, but it's not shite good for rod fishing.
Yeah.
So I think regional approach, regional management is the way forward, especially for Morecambe Bay. That's just like on my personal opinion.
Yeah, what we'll also do is just make sure we keep reiterating that information to them, because I imagine they can still take on some of it up until everything gets released in consultation. We can keep feeding back this information.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
I think it's sort of important, that regional approach, like you said, and a lot of measures have come in when we were part of the EU, which had bad consequential effects on regional fisheries. So, for instance, years ago, when they brought in the cod restrictions, there was a place fishery in the Irish Sea where they used to use large gear, 120mm gear, for targeting the place. And because the EU saw 120mm gear as being predominantly to target cod, they restricted the number of days that those vessels could go out to sea, and that had a detrimental effect on things like the anchor seine fisheries for place and the Irish Sea sort of fisheries potentially. And so I think on a regional basis, you can tailor it a little bit more for being better for the environment and sustainability. So we'll see what comes of it. But as I said, Courtney will feed it in, and then we'll see where we go from there. And hopefully that'll get. It's a good point. So I think we'll bring that up. Okay. Thank you. Right, am I still sharing a screen? I've got to stop that. Stop sharing now. Right. The only other thing I was going to say was just about, I know there's been quite a lot of concern from the industry about the medical requirements. There'll be a link sent through that's got from the MCA about the questions around that. And there was a couple of questions that came out on previous sessions from the MCA. I'm not sure if I know Lawrence Capstick from the MCA was on a previous RFG meeting, and there was a few questions he got asked around that. I don't know, Courtney, if
I think Zia might be on the line if he's willing to kind of pop up.
Yeah, good afternoon. Yes, I'm here now, but yeah, I was not in the last meeting, but I don't know what question was raised. But I think MCS sent some circular recently, and we published a new documentation regarding a medical certificate, and we tried to cover most aspects. So I'm not sure if this was read by everybody or not, but I can share the link if you want for this new document.
Yeah, well, I think we've got a link there for the website, which is on the MCA website. So I think if anyone's got any particular questions about, the requirements that are coming in and grandfather rights and things like that, then if you've got that, they can provide it, and then we'll just make sure that it's the same on our side that we've got.
Yeah, okay. I can send the link across anyway, the one I got. Okay.
Thank
you. I'd like the link too. Thank you.
Okay, has anyone got any other business they want to bring up? Right, thank you very much for everyone's time. The next meeting is probably going to be held in December. I think we haven't got a specific date yet, but it's going to be held in December, and hopefully we'll do a hybrid meeting where it'll be a mixture of both a live meeting and those people who want to join by Teams again, which we were trying to do for this one, but unfortunately we weren't able to do that. But it's likely that it'll be held somewhere in the south. We did look at Lytham potentially, so we'll look again if we're going to do it in and around Lytham St Anne's. So, okay, well, thank you very much for your time. If anyone's got any other topics that they want to bring up which wasn't covered today, then please feed that back into the RFG team, and we'll cover it for next time. Or any specific questions that weren't covered today, then we'll cover it then. Right, well, they'll be recorded, so you'll get a copy of the recording. So if there's anything else that you want to ask, then feel free. Okay, thank you very much for everyone's time.
Thank you. See you soon.
Thanks, Steve. Thank you, Cody. See you later.
Thank you, Steve. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.